Alright, what's up Dragon Brood? Today we're going to be playing some fun stuff because we have some access to Boros. And not the Boros hyper aggro thing we were just playing. We're going to be playing some big, mid-rangey, hefty bodies, really grinded out with dragons and angels, and we're going to have a good old time. So let's hop into this one and have some fun because I don't think the deck list looks like or works the way you think it would. If you're looking for awesome protective gear for your cards, be sure to check out shop.ultrapro.com/PowrDragn and use promo code PowrDragn to save 5%. And that's on everything on the site, including this month's Ocean Blue collection or anything else you decide to pick up. And alright, before we hop into this deck list, I have two things I want to mention. One is that there were versions of this going around, I want to say like a couple of weeks ago. And I built this and never really played it, so my version is a little bit different than some of the ones that were out there. The other thing is, I had some technical difficulties in this video, but it actually leads to some very fun and different style of entertainment for this video. So when you watch the games, I want to know what you think about it. So just hang on tight there for me because I think this is going to be a bit of a different video than we normally do. So if you're regulars around here, you probably will have some fun with it. Alright, so this list, we're starting out with some removal, because we have some Strangles and Dragonfire. But the reason we have these is we do need to get to those later turns, right? A lot of the stuff in this deck is going to really fire at like 5 and 6 mana, so we got to really get up there, and you can't do that if you're not getting things out of the way early. Restoration of Maganjo, this is one of those things that helps us go find a plains, right? It's go get that mana, get us there early. Do whatever we can to make sure we don't miss land drops. And it's actually a pretty sizable body when it actually flips finally. And gaining a little bit of life matters too. Then we have 4 Fable of the Mirror Breaker. This card, this might just be the best card in Standard. I hate saying that like on this type of card, but like pretty much if you're playing red, you're playing this card, right? I mean, it's hard not to play this. I think maybe the most aggressive like Gruul or Boros decks I've built this season don't play it, but I think everything else that plays red plays it, which is kind of crazy to think about it. But it makes a lot of sense. The abilities on this card work in so many different decks. But anyway, we're playing 4 of them. We have 2 Angel Fire Ignitions as like a... for late game heroics is the best way I would describe it. It's not a card we're leaning on, but it can be really strong late in the game to help us out. 3 Wandering Emperors. Y'all have seen Wandering Emperors before, you know what it is. Nothing too surprising. Again, it can make bodies, it can remove something. Kind of checking all the boxes. Now, Invoke Justice. This is a fun one because it can let us get any... The thing I want to point out with this, you can get any target permanent out of the graveyard. It doesn't have to be a creature. And that's pretty big because like you may want to get back a Wandering Emperor or a Restoration or whatever, right? There could be different situations that you need to get something else out. And these could be very good. The other thing about this card is that you get to put 4 counters on any number, up to any number of creatures, right? So you can split those to put 1 each on 4 different creatures. You can put 4 on 1 and none on everything else. You can put 2 and 2. But that makes a difference because our next card, Burn Down the House, right? So if you have a way to potentially make 2 things 6 toughness, well, you could burn down the house and end up with the only big bodies on the table and finish the opponent in a couple turns. Now, the other thing, too, about Burn Down the House is there's going to be a lot of scenarios where it might be okay for us to just go ahead and make the devils, right? Especially if you already have a couple of angels or a dragon coming over the top. Then you're just getting some extra defense on the bottom and some damage. And they have haste. Don't forget that. So that can help as well. Sanctuary Warden. This card's super good, especially in this deck. This is a card I've only put in a handful of lists, and I put just a couple of copies because of the casting cost. Here's not so much because I think we're going to be able to cast it pretty easily. But for 6 mana, you get a 5/5 flyer that can pretty much always be an additional card and a 1/1, which is pretty sweet. And you can remove counters from other creatures and or planeswalkers. So if your Wandering Emperor has already been putting +1/+1s on something, or you have counters from an Angel Fire, you can remove those as well, and still result every time it comes into play or attacks, you get an extra card in the body, which is pretty big because, again, if we're trying to buy time, getting an extra 1/1 citizen is pretty sweet. But just having another thing that comes over the top that's hard for the opponent to deal with is great because it gets those 2 shield counters, and that's pretty big. 4 Mayor's Call, no surprise if we're getting the mana, and this doubles his land, so if we get to 7, great, we cast it. If not, we'll just use it for something else. And then Velomachus Lorehold, not a huge surprise. Now, admittedly, we don't have a ton of spells to cast with this. It's usually going to be Burn Down the House or Invoke Justice or a Dragon's Fire, right? But sometimes it's going to be Angel Fire Ignition, you know, right? Like sometimes. And I don't mind that. I think it's actually totally fine. We don't need a ton to finish the opponents off. Sometimes you just need just a little bit. But a big, hasty Vigilance Dragon, not bad when you can get any extra value off of it, and we can usually cast it pretty easily. Lands, we've got 1 Iganjo, 6 Plains, 2 Mountains, 4 Fury Calm Snarl, 4 Needleverge Pathway, 4 Sundown Pass, and 1 Jetmir's Garden. I also want to say on the Fury Calm Snarl, I am not a fan of, I won't say not a fan, but I don't enjoy playing the Snarls as often because of the other lands that we have available. However, in this list, I do think it's the land that we want because we do want to get to 4 white mana for Invoke Justice. We still want to have double red mana for Burn Down the House. We have some situations where we're going to want to activate something or whatever, right? Or maybe you want to leave mana up to shoot something with a Dragon's Fire while still casting a thing. So the more lands here that can give stuff or give off both colors is pretty big. And the reality of we're playing a fairly slow deck, so the fact that this comes into play tapped shouldn't affect us hardly ever. But something to note just in case. So just want to put that out there. If you don't feel comfortable playing them, feel free to swap them. It's not a big deal. I think in this list, it's totally okay to play them. But, like always, you know the drill. We're going to play the games. Then at the end of the games, I'm going to talk about cards we would like in this list, want to change, update, whatever. And we'll have a card spotlight for you. So, I'll catch you on the other side. Alright, y'all, before we move forward, I just want to tell you something really funny. I actually ended up having an audio issue here. So, you weren't going to have my audio over the games, which we've done that once before and it was okay, and people seem to enjoy it. But I decided I'm going to try something different. I'm going to watch the games back with you, even before I edit them or anything, so you kind of get my commentary of myself. I don't know how you feel about that, but let me know in the comments if you think this is actually fun, because it's a little bit of a different experience. Sort of out of necessity, but we'll see. So let's get to it. Alright, so this hand actually looks mostly fine, but having the 2 Velomachus early makes it kind of bad, especially since, you know, unless we drew a bunch of land off the top, it was going to be really hard to formulate a game plan. So I don't mind keeping here. It's a little worse, but, you know, you got 3 mana, and if you can make it to the Wandering Emperor, you're going to be probably okay here. So I decided to go ahead and keep it. Fortunately, you know, the first card we drew was a land, so that makes it a little bit easier. Yeah, now this is a little tough here. Trying to decide what we should even kill. Like, I was like, if I get a removal card, do I even care that they have this guy, or do I wait for the next best thing? Like, you start asking yourself all these questions pretty early. But here we got lucky. We ended up drawing a Fable. So we get a 2/2. Even if they remove it, it's not the worst thing in the world. And in the event we were to pick up something like a Velomachus or something, we're going to have the opportunity to discard it, which is pretty sweet. Unfortunately, they played a Commando. So then I was just like, oh god, what do we do now? And then you end up in this weird situation, right? Because if I remember right, they attack here on this turn. And I debate a long time here about what to do, because I feel like no matter what, if I take 3, they're probably still going to sacrifice this, and I'm going to lose my Fable of Kiki-Jiki, right? Or Fable of the Mirror Breaker. And I decided to go ahead and block, so I'm like, well, I'll at least kill the 3/1. I don't desperately need the mana right now. I'll still be able to cast the Wandering Emperor. And if they sacrifice it to just kill our Fable, or Fable of the Mirror Breaker, we were going to do that anyway, right? We expected we were going to lose it. So this is actually the best case scenario. We save 3 damage in the process. And now we still have our creature, which, unless they could play something for 2 that's relevant here, we're just going to get to attack. Yeah, and in here, this isn't even bad, because unless it was bigger than 3 toughness, we were going to get off here just with our Wandering Emperor. And they used their treasure for that, by the way. So now they're behind on mana. And we've got everything covered. So this is the part of the match where I started feeling like, okay, now we're starting to pull away a little bit. Because not only do I have 6 mana, I'm going to have access to 7 next turn if I want it, after attacking. Like, if I get it before attacking, then I just get to roll off casting these, Maria's Calls. I didn't, but then we did pick up one of these strangles. So then I was like, well, what do I do with this? Do I just go ahead and kill that? Do I kill a blocker? And to be honest, I'm not 100% sure why I killed it, but I think it's just I didn't want them to get life over the next few turns if I thought I could win through just efficient beatdown over the next couple turns. So we end up getting that down. Go ahead and make a samurai. And then this is where I was kind of like, do we play one of the Amelia's calls to make sure we can cast the other one? Like, do I feel okay attacking with the potential first striker? Which realistically, in hindsight, I think we could have got away with just attacking, get the treasure, cast one of the Amelia's calls, then the next turn cast the other one. But the problem was we wouldn't be able to do that unless we drew another land, because if we use both treasures, now we're another mana behind. Well, that's not necessarily true. We do generate one as well from the goblin token. All right. And we did draw the land off the top. So now in my head, I was kind of like, if we would have just saved that other Amelia's call, maybe I could have got both these off over a couple turns. But it ends up, I don't think, being a big deal here. The opponent doesn't have great blocks if we give something first strike or indestructible. And we're going to generate a treasure right behind it. So this was actually overall a pretty reasonable attack here. Yeah, and I'm just kind of like checking the yard, saying like, what could I even bring back with an Invoke Justice? Because there's really not much there. It's like I could get back a Fable of the Mirror Breaker, but you know, like I would just to put counters on an Angel and try to close the clock, but that'd probably be the only thing we're doing there. Yeah, and here I attack with both creatures because they both have indestructible, so it doesn't really matter, right? The opponent's going to give up either nothing or a token or two here. And I kind of understand their position. Is like, if you don't do that at the end of turn, your tokens become 3/3s and 2/2s or whatever. Now, admittedly, I knew nothing about Jetmir showing up, and I was only mildly concerned because we're still at 19. But I felt like we're really putting the opponent on notice here, because now, admittedly, with Jetmir, you do get Vigilance and Trample, and that's super annoying. But they're at 14. We've got flyers. We can pump one of them. Like, we can do a few things to kill off some attackers here. And this is what I think the opponent's mistake was here, actually. They should have only attacked with the Chariot. Mostly because by attacking with the other tokens, we now can take the Jetmir bonuses away, and they're not really getting much out of this attack, right? If you see how I block here, we block a 4/2, we block the 2 3/1s, and now the opponent doesn't really get anything out of this. I mean, don't get me wrong, they get 10 damage, but after this turn, we've now got Angels, we've got bigger creatures on the ground, and they really don't have anything going on. Yeah, and then we drew the Velomachus, and I was like, well, okay, I guess that's it. And at first, I was looking at it, and I was like, that's 8, that's 13 in the air, I'm 1 short. And I was like, wait a minute, I can just +1 with the Emperor. So put Velomachus down, +1 from the Emperor, and attack for lethal in the air. So yeah, this brings this one to a close. Was an interesting finish, though. The fact that, you know, they kind of drew their best card in Jetmir, and then I drew my best card in Velomachus on back-to-back turns. Which is kind of funny, because I would think more often than not, with a lot of decks the opponent would play against, them drawing Jetmir would be a big play for them. You know, especially going as wide as they were, that could be close to a game ender. Yeah, here they activate the Chariot. I was like, okay. And the one card we can actually play that we got there was Dragon's Fire. So I'm like, yeah, okay, sure. We'll just Dragon's Fire a Chariot just because. It's like, if you're going to make us go through the motions of, you know, you're going to make a Chariot, then sure. But yeah, that does it. That was a good little comeback game there. All right, let's pick this up in this next game here. This hand is actually pretty solid. I don't really have a problem keeping this at all. We have access to 4 mana. We got a removal card. We got a couple of Fables. Now, admittedly, I don't necessarily like having multiples of a lot of the cards in this deck in my opener, but this is fine because a lot of times your first Fable token just dies. So having a backup doesn't suck here. Now, the fact that they got to check for traps, I was just like, well, I guess it's good we had 2 of them in our opener. Check for traps is kind of interesting discard spell too, because, you know, I feel like we don't see a lot of it. But it's still pretty useful whenever we do see it. So, and I haven't really put it except for maybe in 1 or 2 decks. So I'm not really sure how I feel about it. Now, this is where I really start thinking the opponent's deck is pretty sweet, right? You open up with the Halo thing, you end up getting a hearse, and I'm like, what's going on, right? These 2 cards, I didn't check for traps, and I'm like, I have no idea. So now I play this game probably a little bit too timid in a couple spots. And I think I actually make a couple of mistakes here because I just, like, cards I'm unfamiliar with on the opponent's side, like, I'm not really piecing together their game plan. And sometimes it's just going to happen, right? It happens for myself just playing a bunch of new cards all the time that I hardly ever play with. But when you're also seeing them on the other side in different combinations, you can lead yourself to making mistakes, which is kind of a benefit when you're playing a deck that people don't know about or whatever. Downside is it's also untested, so you don't get to benefit from everybody else's knowledge. Yeah, so here I was kind of deciding if I wanted to discard Velomachus or not, but I didn't have the Invoke to get it back into play. So I decided I'll just discard a land, let the land come into play, and then that puts me a turn sooner to the Amaria's Call Velomachus situation here. Because it's already 5 mana. I'll have 1 as 6. I attack for 1 and get a treasure. That's 7. So that should help. Now, an interesting thing here is the graveyard's clear, so there's nothing for them to do with the hearse. So we kind of have free runway here, unless they just have removal cards. And that's okay if they do. I mean, we know we're really setting up for the next 2 turns, right? Some combination of Amaria's Call and Velomachus on the next turn. So I don't greatly care what happens here. I decide to go ahead and just discard the Strangle because at this point I'm kind of assuming the opponent doesn't really have stuff, or the only thing they're going to be able to kill is probably going to be a Planeswalker, but I now have the Burn Down the House and the Dragon's Fire in hand, and I'm probably never going to get, except for 1 good shot maybe at the Unlicensed Hearse, you know, maybe if I leave the mana open. So this, by the way, ends up being a little bit of a potentially bad attack if the opponent would get something into play and or block with the hearse here or whatever. Hearse. It's a hearse, no T. So yeah, I was kind of curious what the opponent was going to do here. And then, of course, they flashed in the Wandering Emperor. And that was a little bit of something I was concerned about. So you get a flash creature, now you can crew the hearse, and now you can remove cards from the graveyard. So I'm definitely going to lose a creature, but it's not game-ending here. What it does mean, though, is if I wouldn't have got as greedy, and I would have just attacked with my 2/2, I could have possibly just killed the hearse with the Dragon's Fire. So if I'd have been a little bit more patient, there would have been a bigger payoff for us. But yeah, here they block. They're going to go ahead and remove stuff from the graveyard. Make a 3/3 hearse, I believe. Which is also another good reason for us to not have put Velomachus into the yard, as it turned out. But we're still not doing bad, right? We've got access to 7 mana. 8, technically, if we want to use the Amaria's Call in hand. We're about to get the 3rd chapter of Fable of the Mirror Breaker. So we'll be able to copy Angel soon if we want to. Opponent doesn't have any good attacks here because we have a 3/4 blocker. That will also result in us making another token. So yeah, we're not bad off here at all. The opponent does have 4 cards and 4 mana, but I think it's mostly fine. The only thing is here is if we're going to play one of our 7 mana spells, we probably want to just go ahead and play Amaria's Call. Now here, I decided to go ahead and blow up my treasure and gamble on drawing a land or not to go ahead and just play the Dragon's Fires. Because this means I can now attack safely if the opponent doesn't have a removal card in hand. And there was no point in, like, I could have waited to see what they blocked with or whatever, but I knew I was going to want my mana on this turn, especially if we drew one. Because now, pre-combat, we just go ahead and play the Angels. And then boom, 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 get a couple of big attacks in here. Alright, so they did have the removal, so it's good that we didn't lead with Velomachus. That was one of the biggest reasons, right? We were worried about that. And then we're just going to send everything into the Wandering Emperor here. And the main reason we're doing this is that attacking the opponent doesn't really do enough there. They do still have a couple of mana open, so something could have happened here. I don't know what something would have been, but you always have to process that something could be there. Alright, they block. We don't lose anything because they do have Indestructible, which is a little bit of a weird thing, but it's something to be aware of, that if we needed those to die to get extra damage for some reason, playing that pre-combat could have been bad, because we would have actually lost the ability to have those sacrifice and die, because they would have been indestructible. I mean, we could sacrifice them, but die on their own. And then here, it's like, okay, now I think this is game. Opponent has 1 mana open. Velomachus plus the Angels is 13, plus 2 of the things get through on the ground, that's 15. The one that gets blocked does an extra point, so that's 16. Like, yeah, that's it. Alright, so this hand is a little tough. Like, it's one of those ones where you look and say, okay, if we can get to a 3rd mana, doesn't even matter the color. If we can get to a 3rd mana, we'll be okay. Because if we can at least get down the white enchantment, we can go ahead and find a plains that gets us to 4 mana, and we can start talking about other things. Unfortunately, we drew a land there. We're just going to play it tapped here to save damage. And I was pretty sure right here that this was the opponent playing Orzhov Clerics. And the tough thing here is the opponent didn't have a turn 2 play. So now I'm kind of thinking, alright, if you don't have a turn 2 play, that means there's some type of removal here. Otherwise, we would have played a creature. Now, I'm also pretty sure if they didn't play a creature, that probably means they have like the double white creature or whatever that they need to cast. So I really kind of debated what to go with here. I decided to go with Fable of the Mirror Breaker because we lost the token. We still have some value coming from our other cards, especially with us having the Invoke Justice in hand. And we were right. I mean, the enchantment got removed with the Vanishing Verse there. So that's actually pretty... I felt pretty good about the order we played everything in. Even more so because now if that's their only play, well, we can go ahead and just fire up this here Angel Fire Ignition. And they don't even have a good block here. Like, double blocking doesn't even do anything. So yeah, we get to attack, we gain life, we keep their life total down to make life harder on their Righteous Valkyrie. Now we have treasure, so going into next turn, we could have 6 mana. Which then means we could play our Big Angel, we could do a bunch of different things if we want to. But this does open some pretty interesting decisions for us. Because it's... And I debated this, I think, for a bit, looking at this hand. This is funny, because I played the games, but now I'm going back to watch them with y'all. But I think what I was looking at here is, do I want to play a Big Angel? Do I just want to go really big on our creature and just put 4 counters on it and, you know, see what happens? But then I decided, you know what if I just attack here? Because if the opponent blocks, then we just flash in the Wandering Emperor and we get to get rid of their Big Angel, right? We'll first strike for 5. If they don't block, well, they take 5 and we'll take at least 4 and go to 18 or 19. Then I can go ahead and play my other cards if I want to, right? We could play a Fable and we could do something. So that's fine too. Or I could just spend 4 mana up front and then just go ahead and attack with the Angel Fire Ignition recast and do something there too. So there was a few options here, but I decided I like this plan better. I was pretty sure, though, the attack was going to get through. Either that or the opponent's just going to block with their 1/1, right? Because there's no way you're blocking with the 4/5 here when you're tapped out. Like, I'm playing red and white, so there's the odds of me having some type of damage or Wandering Emperor or whatever, it's just too high with 4 cards in hand, 5 cards in hand. So yeah, this is about what I expected was going to happen here. No surprise. So then we play the Fable of the Mirror Breaker. And then I think I just leave mana up. I don't think I actually even play anything here. Because now you want to just use the Wandering Emperor to get rid of one of the angels. And I knew the downside here was that they could get to 27 life. So potentially we're going to take a little bit of extra damage. But we're at 21, so I'm not that worried about it. So here they go to 24. And then Aura puts them at exactly 27. So they barely had it. And the other good thing here is Wandering Emperor removes something, so you don't have it go to the graveyard, so that's good. And then we kind of get to decide what the next couple turns look like. So not a surprise what we're doing with the Wandering Emperor here. The only thing was, do we want to get rid of the Righteous Valkyrie? But I was like, nah, we get rid of the thing that's more of a problem, especially if we end up hitting something like Burn Down the House. You don't want them getting like 3 things back or whatever. Okay. Yeah, and this was kind of like the decision point of like, what do we discard if we are going to discard? But I kind of liked the whole hand, which made this a little bit tough. Especially with what we're up against. Like, I felt pretty secure right now. The opponent's got 2 cards left. Yeah, that was a big one. Because then it sort of changed everything. It's like, okay, well now what does next turn look like? Right? You start thinking about, what's the next turn? What's the next turn? And this had a few other options too, right? We could, again, do something with Invoke Justice. We could play the Angel Fire Ignition. Yeah, you see me kind of going through all the motions here. I think I was trying to explain this for the camera at the time. But then also, we could give something +1/+1 still in First Strike, which is nice. So if we make the 4/4 into a 5/5, they can't block effectively and gain any life from Aura. Right? We could flash something back. We could do like all types of things. But I decided to go with, let's get the Angel. We target ourselves so we get to put the counters. And we're just going to make another big body here on the ground. So now we have 2 5/5 pluses that don't give the opponent any real value here. And here's the other nifty thing is we're going to get treasure off this. So we're going to have access to 3 mana. So we could just play this white enchantment as well behind it if we want to. Here I decided to take a counter off of the Planeswalker because I wanted to leave as much protection for our Angel as possible. Because I didn't know what type of removal the opponent had. They weren't close to doing any type of meat hook thing. So if they had any type of other board sweeper that would benefit them, letting the big creatures back into play, I wanted to make sure I still had a creature out on board. If they have an exile effect, so be it. They just get us, you know. So here we get our attacks in. We do get our 2 treasure. But the funny thing is, one of the cards we drew was actually Dragon's Fire off of the Angel. So now I'm checking their graveyard because like the only thing they have left to get back is just the little 1/1 dude. So I'm like, yeah, sure, we'll hit this thing. I don't care. Like, even them getting the life here doesn't really matter to me. They go to 24. Even if they go to 27, what are they going to do? Right? We have a big 5/5 in the way with shields on it. We've got a big set of indestructible stuff next turn. Though, our Angel won't be indestructible because it's an Angel. And then the opponent knows we still have access to the Angel Fire Ignition. So we really weren't even close to being in any real danger here. Which is kind of crazy considering that the opponent got Aura, got their Righteous Valkyrie, got their early Veteran, like got all the cards they wanted for the most part, and we were still in pretty good shape. Yeah, they even got their big 4/5 Angel. You know, we were in pretty good shape. So now we can get to attack, we can do a thing. Yeah, the opponent just gave up. I don't blame them. Alright, so this game is kind of an interesting one to include. And we're just playing all the games that we ran into here in this run. But this one's a fun one to talk about because if I remember right, this is a game where I actually make several mistakes that compound the situation that have a really big effect on the end of the game. And we'll talk about them when we get to them. But this hand is actually pretty solid, right? As an opener, we have a removal card. We have 3 mana to cast a couple things. We have a card that can go get our 4th mana to allow us to play the Wandering Emperor. So I feel pretty good about all this. Especially with the way the opponent starts, because I'm like, oh, well, that's cool. Like, we can pretty much just get to do whatever we want on this turn. Sounds great. I decided to go with Fable of the Mirror Breaker just because it can get us to treasure a little bit sooner and ramp up now that we have the Velomachus. And here's an interesting thing on this turn. I debated if I should even discard anything at all here. I'm not sure I do. I think I end up keeping everything in this hand. I could be wrong, but I felt like I kept everything. No, I discarded the Velomachus. Okay. Hindsight, maybe that's situation 1. Oh, yeah, I do remember that because I discarded it and I realized, like, wait, I should have kept that because I can get 2 treasure off of this goblin token over the next 2 turns. Like, they're not going to kill it here, so I get at least 1, and then I already have access to 7 mana, so I shouldn't have discarded anything. So that's mistake 1 in this game. This also helps me go find a land. So, like, yeah, discarding the Velomachus was just pointless. Discarding anything in the hand was kind of pointless here. And then on the same turn, I make mistake number 2. I don't really need to cast this Strangle. Like, I could have waited on this for just anything better. And because, like, for some decks, the Innkeeper could matter, right? That incremental life gain, whatever. But we are not one of those decks where we're trying to... Like, we can do big chunks late in the game. So if somebody's at 26, 27, like, fine. We can still end the game without too much concern. And they hadn't really shown us a way they were going to put a bunch of... Now, we assume they're playing Scoot Swarms and stuff, but, like, that would have been fine. And here, we weren't really worried about anything because we do still have the Wandering Emperor, so we could just kill an attacker. Also here, we learned a neat thing, that no matter what, you can't get around the land coming into play untapped because it's coming in by the effect of the Restoration of Aganjo. So even though I revealed the thing, though, it's not that big a deal, but, you know, it's just like, okay, let's confirm that this card works the way we want. So I think I did it a second time. I think I did it in a previous game in this video. But, you know, just to kind of show, like, hey, let's do it again. Let's make sure. Because revealing the land doesn't matter because we were going to play the land. So at least now we know. But now think about this. If I would have had that Strangle still, opponent gets to attack here. I'm probably just going to remove this with the Wandering Emperor. So I still stay... Well, actually, not only do I stay at 15, I go to 17. Which is pretty important. But the opponent's got a 3/3. It's going to come in and attack here. So yeah, so this is a big deal. I would get to kill that off.
I've learned much during my travels. Let me show you. You're done.
And then, as it turns out, I could have just killed a Scoot Swarm. Now, admittedly, they have a second one. But if I kill a Scoot Swarm here, I almost have very little to worry about the rest of the way. You know what I mean? And this is also a turn I could have had a Velomachus. I could have a Velomachus last turn, I guess, too. So, multiple things already. You're talking about, we're on turn 6 or 7. 6, I think. And there's effectively 2 major decision points that I messed up already. Now, the rest of this isn't so bad. It's like, okay, cool. I do this, get my stuff indestructible. I get to attack with everything. Like, cool. But here, again, things have indestructible, so why do I really care about putting a counter on there? Because they can still just chump block with their, like, 1/1 plant token or whatever it is. So I should have just made another 2/2 here. Especially since all the opponent's going to have is Scoot Swarm or Scoot Swarm tokens, that they're going to have to give up 2 of them anyway to block one of our Samurai. Right? So again, here, instead of the opponent having what ends up being, what, like 8 Scoot Swarms, they would have had 4. If I would have killed off one of them. So, like, this is a good example of just showing, like, these small little incremental decisions can have a big effect on the game, right? Because I think too often people get in situations where we think, oh, I got to make this big brain play or whatever. But a lot of times it's not that play that's affecting the outcome. It's these little ones, right? So though it looks like when you get to the end of the game that your opponent got lucky or you didn't top deck the thing you needed or whatever, that's why I tell people, like, think about other spots of the game, record yourself if you can and go watch. Like, sometimes there's little decisions. And don't look at it as like being results oriented of like, oh, well, I only lost, I would have done this differently if I, but no, but like in the moment, did that other play make more sense? And as it turns out, I made at least 2 that for sure didn't make more sense. And really, like I said, I could have had another Samurai attacking on this turn. I could have had another Samurai as a blocker. Right, so I could have had 2 more creatures on the field, one of them attacking here, and a follow-up creature or removal card in the second Wandering Emperor. Which makes a big difference, because the opponent is at 22. We're coming through the top with 8. We're going to make a couple of other blockers. So yeah, this would have been a big deal. Definitely had potential, and even as slow as the game was for me and the opponent hitting their Scoot Swarms and all their fetches or whatever, we were still in really good shape here. But, again, I can't blame anybody but myself. Opponent does do some interesting blocks here, deciding if they want to triple block, double block, whatever. They decide not to. Which ends up being the smart move for them, actually. For several reasons that, you know, I could have effectively just flashed in the Wandering Emperor and not even lost a creature. It would have reduced the number of bodies they get next turn. And let's be honest, if I was going to pump something, it probably should have just been an Angel anyway. Right? You know what I mean? Like, the thing's going to do the most damage. Now, admittedly, it only would have put the opponent down to 13. But I guess I could have just copied an Angel next turn, if we're still alive, and then just attack for 13, which would have been lethal. Now, with the opponent being at 14, we could attack for 12, and that, or could attack for 13 next turn. It wouldn't be enough. Turns out they gained some life here anyway, so it's irrelevant. But based on what we knew, you know, these are little bitty plays that, while they look irrelevant, are a big deal. Now, them getting the Roastmaster was pretty sweet here. But again, we lose this just because of how I played the game out, right? Having 2 more creatures here makes all the difference in the world. Literally, having 2 more creatures would have been the difference between me winning and losing this game. Because now we get to exile 1. I mean, I guess arguably in some way, like, even being over-aggressive on the last turn doesn't do a lot for us. Because we could have saved to block as well, which could have been a thing, so I don't know. That's a little bit of a results-oriented situation, but we're at -1, and we definitely could have prevented more than 2 damage. Alright, so hopping into this one, this hand was a quick mulligan, because we really couldn't do much with that last one. This one is okay, but we do have a bunch of slow lands. Now, granted, the one Jetmir's Garden actually does a fun thing that it can let the Snarls come into play untapped. So if that was a concern to me, I could reveal the Jetmir's Garden because it does count as one of the proper creature type or land types and could be beneficial. Right, so we end up taking 1 going to 19. Opponent plays Underdog, which it's fine, whatever, right? I wasn't that worried about it. We can go ahead and play one of these tap lands and kill the Underdog. And then kind of see what the opponent does. We're still early in the game. You know, the black decks have some ways to draw cards and whatnot, so you're not going to be too surprised by anything that happens over the next couple turns. I think my thought here was, we know that mono black decks want to play till turn 6, 8, 10, right? They want to play those long games. So can I make plays that will stretch the game out for me as well, right? Put me in a position where I can do some good things. Especially, you know, we're talking about, you know, getting the Invoke Justice, all right? That's one of those types of cards. But just like here, it's like, okay, I need them to deal with their removal, getting rid of some stuff early, so that when we get to the Invoke Justice, assuming there's something in the graveyard worth getting, it's beneficial, right? Otherwise, it's just going to die on sight. Yeah, this was what I really wasn't hoping to see. I didn't want them to end up with the extra cards here. Now they have the cards and the mana. Ugh, and that's tough. And I did get a little concerned here about Invoke Despair. So I started trying to figure out, like, okay, what can we do here? I do end up playing the Restoration because it does get me to my 5th mana. And this was like, if I feel like there's a Restoration, at least if I do this, or an Invoke Despair, I at least get a land out of this that can give me something, maybe, right? The other option would have been to go ahead and play one of the other Fables of the Mirror Breaker, give up the newer of the Fable and the token, and then only lose 2 life, give the opponent 1 card or whatever, right? Which is a reasonable line. I don't really hate that. The only concern I had is I just don't have any other threats in hand, and I would have hated to have been down to just our Kiki-Jiki token and the Goblin token. So I don't know. Arguably, still could have been right, though. Keeping the opponent off that extra card and saving 2 life could be a big deal sometimes. And then I really didn't have anything to get with the Invoke Justice. So there is an argument to say, like, okay, we'll just play one of the Fables out, lose the token in the new Fable, then we just go get our 5th land anyway with the Restoration the next turn. You know what I mean? Like, that's probably fine. Now, the fact that we got Velomachus here at least opened the door for something to do with the Invoke Justice. And my thought was, all right, I guess we just go for it. The problem is we hadn't made the opponent spend much removal here, so I knew this was a very gambly play, right? There was a chance this doesn't do a whole lot. Yeah, and there I was like testing the thing with the Restoration again on the Snarl. Yeah, we get this in play, and I was kind of hoping, like, if this sticks, this is big, right? It's half their life total, and we get a spell. But it's also possible... Yeah, exactly. Infernal Grasp. There was a couple of things that could have been. So, that was a little tough. Now I started thinking about, like, how do we get out of this now? Because the opponent's got 5 cards and a pile of mana. They also have a underdog in the graveyard. Yeah, Body Launderer is pretty serious business too. So I'm like, okay, what do we do with this? This was also an interesting decision point because knowing that I had the Dragon's Fire, part of this was going to be like, when do I want to kill the Launderer? Because we don't want to attack into it. It's just like when on their turn, right? Depending on what they play, depending on what they sacrifice, like do they flashback or whatever we're calling it, the blitz cost, I guess, on the underdog. Yeah, and then this was tough because I think I'm supposed to just kill the Body Launderer here. However, I was thinking like maybe they sacrifice the Body Launderer, but really what I forgot is they both have Death Touch. And if that's the case, there's zero reason to do anything with the Launderer, right? You're definitely only going to sacrifice the Fell Stinger. So the best play for us would have been to shoot the Launderer, and then at that time, I think the best thing in the yard was still just the Shambling Gas. So they could get that back, and then they probably would have just sacrificed the Ghast and kept the 3/2 Scorpion. But, I don't know. Either way, they still end up with just Scorpion in play, so I guess it's not a huge deal. And it's arguably, if we did it the other way, they would have had another treasure because they would have sacrificed the Gas, so... I don't know. It's interesting to think about, though, right? It's one of those plays that maybe it doesn't matter that much, but I think it's at least worth considering. Kind of one of those things that even if the outcome doesn't change greatly, you gotta at least consider the options. Here, I'm like, I'm not playing this other Fable. Let's just find something better. And then I don't really know if this was better or not. This is one I was a little bothered at myself on because I felt like the opponent has enough mana now that at some point, a Meat Hook, I don't know, Blood on the Snow, whatever's probably going to happen here. And I should be playing for that, with that in mind. But I think I also looked at it and said, look, they're at 14, we're at 13. If I go ahead and get this down, we can get a bunch of attacks in, do some things. Maybe we kill off this Scorpion. You know, I make another treasure so I can do whatever off the top of the library. And I also thought the opponent still has a nearly full grip plus active cards in graveyard. Like, what are our odds really of winning this game, right? So I just decided, okay, if our odds are pretty low, let me just go for the aggressive option and see if we can kill them. Now this, let me pause this here actually for a second before it goes too far. But like, one of the concerns I had here, and this is one, again, a little thing, I don't think it affects the end of the outcome that much, but I should have just, I think I'm debating here, do I shoot the opponent with this 1 point from the Devil, or do I shoot the Scorpion? The Scorpion's got 1 damage on it already, I can target it, kill it, get it out the way. But the opponent is only at 7, and the fact that I have 2 other Devils in play means they're effectively at 5, right? With me having 5 attackers. So they really need to find more blockers next turn. Or die one of the following 2 turns, barring them gaining some life. Or getting a Meat Hook, right? So shooting the Scorpion doesn't really do anything here. Like, in theory, it keeps them from blocking one of my other creatures. But I figured, you know what? I should probably just shoot the opponent, because the other giveaway here is the opponent has a Death Toucher that didn't block my 3/4 creature. They didn't want to save extra damage, which is also very weird. You know what I mean? Like, you could kill my best thing that's also making tokens, but you choose to just block one of my devils. So I was having a hard time processing that. And the reality is they're only going to do that if they have another play in mind. Or their hand is absolute blanks, one or the other. Either way, I'm probably better off just shooting them for 6. But at least that's the way it feels. Shooting them for 1, putting them at 6. But it was just something to think about. Because I was trying to figure out what is the outcome, why that play, you know? And this ends up being a pretty smart play from the opponent, because if I target this and they have a way to sacrifice it or something, they basically prevented 2 damage that they wouldn't have prevented otherwise. But, you know, they also killed off an attacker for future turns. And again, so I'm like, I wish I would have targeted them, put them to 6. Now they ended up getting 2 cards, and I got nothing out of that. Ugh. But we did put them at 7. I still think, though, in the opponent's shoes, you're better off just blocking the 3/4, truthfully. But my guess is they were digging anyway, got to the meat hook. We get to some triggers that are going to put them down to 5, but then we go right back up to 10. So yeah, not a lot happening here for us. This is pretty rough. Just top decking a land doesn't do much here. So I'm queuing up the GGs. And I'm kind of like, all right, opponent. Any day now. And at this point, I'm kind of wondering if the opponent went AFK for real. Not even just like roping, because they obviously are kind of in the advantage position here, right? Considering I have no cards. But don't know what happened to them. All right, and they're back. They had a legit situation. But it turns out, I don't think they were AFK at all. I think they were just thinking, right? Which now concerned me, because they took a long time to think, like a full minute practically, and they played a dollhouse, which isn't a bad choice, but it means that they have something else in hand or some other line of play that they thought was good enough, or at least similar enough to playing a dollhouse, that it warranted some level of decision. So now I'm kind of like, oh goodness, like, do we have a real shot here at all? Yeah, and that was like the kick in the pants. They got a creature out just to sacrifice it to get rid of our Kiki-Jiki token. It was like, ugh. All right, so at this point, I'm like, okay, I guess we're still playing Magic. I don't know, right? They have some stuff in the yard worth getting with the dollhouse, so that makes sense. But this restoration, I mean, I was just like, I can prevent some damage to myself because I am only at 12. But I started thinking about, like, how am I getting out of this? One of those was, well, maybe I'll find it Invoke Justice. Well, this comes out and removes our graveyard. Which, credit to the opponent. We haven't had many spots for Callous Blood Mage, so that's pretty sweet. So then I'm like, okay, no graveyard. I have 1 card in hand that doesn't do much. Do we have any realistic outs? I'm like, I guess I just have to top deck Velomachus. Okay, like, what else am I going to do? And opponent's at 10. So, I mean, even if I get Velomachus and I were to get the Invoke Justice, like, that's only 9. So that still doesn't kill the opponent. So this was a pretty sweet move. Get your Fell Stinger out of the yard. Sacrifice your other dude that you've already got your best value out of. Get 2 cards. But here, it's like, okay, now they go to 8. Now this makes Velomachus and a lucky top deck like a real thing. So now I'm intrigued. I'm like, okay, well, can we get there now, right? Okay, getting in there. We go to 10. Yep, nothing else. All right. Here's open. I was like, okay, I got the Angel. That's something, right? 2 attacks from this. We can kill the opponent. I like it. And then I had a tough decision to make. I did decide to break the shield, and this was huge. Being able to pick up an Angel Fire Ignition, which, by the way, I should have just played my Agandro there. I don't know why I was holding on to it. But, all right, we get to attack for 7. Ultimately, is sad, because it means the opponent's just going to go to 1. But there's not a huge difference here between 1 and 2, other than the fact that if they can kill one of my creatures, they could go up to enough to maybe, like, somehow play another Scorpion and lose 2 life. But I felt like if we were going to get out of this, I needed some other number of cards. in case our angel still died. So I decided to remove a 1/1. So if for some reason I need to block or do something here, I can still do that and not lose my angel. But the opponent is at 2, and now I go ahead and play that. So if I end up wanting to play a combination of like up to 3 cards next turn, I will be set to do that. But again, could have kept it in hand. Not a huge deal. But now it's like, okay, unless you have exactly a sacrifice effect, I'm in pretty good shape. And the opponent thinks about it real hard here, but we're at 16. You know, we have enough breathing room that we can take some damage. So I'm not too worried about it. And next turn, Wandering Emperor plus Angel Fire, like those bring the game to a close for sure. If they don't, I mean, really, they need to get a flyer or something. But the problem for them is they know we have Angel Fire Ignition, which is going to pretty much guarantee damage gets in. And they're only at 2. Alright, they activate the Dollhouse. There's nothing left to get with the Dollhouse, is there? Oh, there was the... Forgot. So they removed the graveyard again to keep us from using the Angel Fire Ignition, which is a good play, honestly. I did forget that was a thing. Now here's another interesting thing, where I was actually just getting so excited about, wish you could have heard the original commentary because I think I was really animated here, but now I was like, oh man, I might actually win this thing after it looked unwinnable, right? This Angel's ridiculous. But the thing is, like I just told you, I'm at 16 life. I don't need to block with both of these tokens. Because blocking with both of these tokens is one of the only ways I could lose from here. Because if the opponent has an Invoke Justice, I would have to sacrifice the Sanctuary Warden, and I would be dead. So this is a really, really bad block. I should just let the extra 2 damage through because nothing's happening here. You know what I mean? Like nothing, there's no relevance to that block that's going to affect the outcome of this game. And even if there is, the upside to that block is so small compared to the downside. Because the downside is detrimental. Now, the fact the opponent didn't immediately play Invoke Despair, I was already super happy. And as soon as they cast out to put something in the yard, I knew we were good. Because the only other thing maybe they could be looking for would probably be like, I don't know, Eye Twitch or some such. So yeah, I was like, all right, I guess this is it. Like, started to feel real good. And it was a little bit before they passed here. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, we could still invoke, but you didn't instantly cast it. So I'm assuming you don't have it. So I started thinking, like, what are they debating here that could take so long? And it's blood on the snow. I'm like, well, great. I saved all my shield counters. So that's good. All right, opponent's at 4, not nearly enough, and we actually found more cards to help us out here. So that was pretty sweet. Yeah, I think here I just like removed a 1/1 just because. I was like, I don't know, let's just do it. Yeah, but that was a good comeback with this deck. I don't know, y'all. That was really good, like way better than I thought. And we had a couple of really good come from behind victories, which makes that even sweeter. So yeah, I don't know what I really want to change about this list. Like, I could see maybe changing Strangle to 2 Fateful Absence, potentially. And I'm probably going to add 1 or 2 of the Shatter Skull Smashings into the list. But that might be all. I don't think I'm really going to change much else. I actually liked this list quite a lot, the way it played. So a couple of those minor changes, but otherwise, yeah, I was into this. This was pretty fun. I recommend it if you like anything you saw in this video. Now for today's card spotlight, we're going to talk about Balefire Liege. This is a card I don't think a lot of people know about, but it's actually pretty sweet. It pumps white creatures +1 and red creatures +1, which means if you have a white and red creature, you get +2, which is pretty neat because we don't get too many cards like that. However, anytime you play a red spell, you get to deal damage to somebody, and if you play a white spell, you get to gain life. So this card is doing a lot of things for its casting cost, and it also happens to be a 2/4 body, which isn't chump change. It can block quite a few things. So I do let this card find its way into my commander decks every once in a while, and this is pretty cheap. I think you can still find these for between $3 and $4, which is pretty amazing because I don't think it's been reprinted. That's not true. I think if it has, it's been in like a mystery booster or some such. I don't know. But either way, totally worth picking up. Super fun card if you haven't played with it before. Now, as always, don't forget, if you want to support the channel, please check out the join membership button down below. And if you want to come be part of all this crazy stuff you saw in the video, remember, you can come join our Discord or follow me on my streams. But more importantly is, if you like this video, I'm going to include another mid-rangey deck, so check that out, because if you like this one, you're probably going to like that one. That's all I have for you for now. We'll see you next time.